You'd have to be living under a rock not to know about the Charlie Kirk murder. Everyone's been talking about it. The headlines, the speculation, the politics. But what's not getting enough attention is the legal side, the choices prosecutors are making, the charges that they've filed, and why this case is playing out in a Utah courtroom instead of under federal jurisdiction. That's what I want to break down. The defendant, Tyler James Robinson, has been charged in Utah State Court with aggravated murder, use of a firearm, and obstruction of justice. Under Utah law, aggravated murder is a capital offense. What that means is that the state could seek the death penalty. Under Utah law, when prosecutors charge aggravated murder, they have to file a notice if they intend to seek the death penalty, also known as a death notice. That triggers a whole separate track of procedure. The defense gets more resources, including extra investigators and mitigation specialists. Jury selection also takes much longer because you're not just asking people whether they can be fair, you're asking whether they can impose a death sentence. Juries can choose between death and life without parole if the case gets that far. So when you hear capital offense, it's not just a dramatic label. It actually changes how the entire trial is conducted from start to finish. And remember, in Utah, a death notice doesn't just change what happens inside the courtroom. It changes the timeline. It changes the appeals. If a death sentence is imposed, there's an automatic appeal to the Utah Supreme Court. Then years of post-conviction litigation. So when prosecutors file a death penalty notice, they're not just making a statement about punishment. They're committing the state to a marathon process that could last a decade or more. Now, here's the part people get wrong. With the FBI involved, some assume that this should be a federal case, but federal cases require very specific conditions. Crimes on federal property, attacks on federal officials, motives tied to race, religion, or another protected category. As of now, investigators haven't tied this shooting to any of those, so Utah is handling it, as it should. And that also means the trial will likely be televised, because Utah allows cameras in the courtroom, but the federal courts don't. So the public will see this play out in a way that is quite rare for something that is this high profile. So when does the federal government step in? A classic example is Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. That case went federal because the attack destroyed a federal building, killed federal employees, and involved explosives regulated under federal law. That gave prosecutors multiple ways to bring charges in federal court. You also see federal jurisdiction when crimes target members of Congress, federal judges, or law enforcement officers like the FBI. Another example are hate crimes where the motive is tied to race, religion, or national origin. Those can be charged federally under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. The point is, the federal government has tools for certain kinds of crimes, but they are narrow. And unless one of those hooks is present, cases stay with the state, just like this one. What this exposes is a gap in the law. The U.S. doesn't have a general domestic terrorism statute for politically motivated violence. Instead, we've got a patchwork. Some federal statutes, some hate crime laws, some provisions for federal officials, but nothing broad enough to automatically capture a case like this. So even though Kirk was a podcaster and provocateur with national reach, his killing is being treated under state law, like any other murder. That's not a mistake. That's the system we have. Now, this case is shocking. It's emotional. But the suspect is entitled to a defense. The presumption of innocence still applies. The prosecution still has to prove its case. Evidence, whether it's surveillance video, ballistics, digital records, or witness testimony, has to be admitted properly, tested in court, and weighed by a jury. That's not a loophole. That's the foundation. And if we let outrage replace due process, we erode the very rights that protect all of us when we are accused. And we've seen what happens when due process gets sidelined. Wrongful convictions, overturned verdicts, years of appeals. It's not just theoretical. Courts have reversed convictions where defense lawyers weren't prepared properly, where key evidence was mishandled, where the state cut corners. That's why the Constitution builds in protections that apply to everyone, no matter how ugly the allegation or how unpopular the defendant. The stakes go beyond Utah and beyond this one defendant. This case will shape how people think about political violence and whether rhetoric, even ugly, provocative rhetoric, ever gets framed as justification for violence. The answer in law is no, but don't be surprised if arguments about ideology hover in the background. And because the trial will likely be televised, the whole country will be watching those arguments play out in real time. Here's what I'll be paying attention to. Will Utah pursue the death penalty? That's not just about punishment, it's about the resources and time that will go into this trial. A death penalty case could take years to resolve, while a straight life sentence case could move much faster. Will prosecutors try to build a narrative around ideology or stick to a straight murder case? How will the defense respond? Will they attack the evidence or lean on mental health? And finally, will the transparency of this trial build trust or will it slide into spectacle? Transparency, of course, cuts both ways. Televising this trial could reassure people that nothing's happening in the shadows, or it could create a circus where sound bites matter more than the substance. Which way it goes will depend a lot on the judge and how tightly they control the proceedings. This case matters because violence in response to speech undermines democracy. It chills expression. It tells people that saying what they believe could cost them their lives. And once that belief takes root, polarization only gets worse. The legal system's response has to be firm, but also fair. Not to give anyone a pass, but to make sure due process doesn't break down in the most charged case of the decade. Because if it does, that precedent won't stop there. Now, the killing of Charlie Kirk is tragic. Utah has charged the suspect with aggravated murder, and that case is moving forward. Kirk wasn't a politician. He was a podcaster and he was a provocateur. But however you saw him, the way this trial is handled will shape how we think about violence, speech, and the rule of law. So don't just follow the outrage. Follow the process. Watch how the law is applied, because if the process breaks down here, it won't stop with this one case. I'm Joel Chorny. Remember, you have rights. They matter. Protect them. Stay safe. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this, where I talk about legal issues, your rights, how to protect them, and things that are interesting in the news. So if you found this video interesting, please click subscribe, share it with anyone else that you think would be interested in watching it, and catch me in the rest of my videos on my channel.